Ruffy, you now recognize.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I would like to echo the statement of Representative Rodriguez. I myself filed a bill specifically reimposing death penalty for high-level drug trafficking, which is now going to be taken up by the Committee on Justice. But I have written the Committee on Justice withdrawing or asking that my bill be excluded from their agenda for certain reasons. One of which is that I do not believe that a divisive issue such as this is timely to be taken up. So with regard to my bill, House Bill 742, that is part of the agenda of the Committee on Dangerous Drugs, my bill does not mention death penalty. But my concern was that there was a provision here, as shown in the matrix, in the bill of Representative Barbers and Representative Rodriguez, which has that line with regard to the death penalty. I was about to make a manifestation in the course of our hearing today that if we could exclude this provision and let the Committee on Justice take up the death penalty proposals so that we can move forward and have the other provisions of amending RA 9165 go through the plenary without much controversy or debate. Kasi Mr. Chair, alam naman natin, mainit talagang usapin ngayon yung death penalty. Baka doon tayo matisod. Yung other objectives of the bills in improving and strengthening 9165, masasabit din siya. Plus the complication of another committee taking up the death penalty bill. So that if matutuloy itong provision na to as worded, Mr. Chairman, I would have to join Representative Rodriguez in requesting that House Bill 742 would likewise be excluded from this consolidation of similar bills. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Congress, Barbers, would you like to respond to the manifestation of Cong Rufus and Cong Ruffy Biazon?
Yes, again, I'd like to thank Cong Rufus and Cong Ruffy for Rufus and Ruffy. It sounds
idem sonams.
Oh, nga. So anyway, I do respect the positions manifested and stated by our two honorable gentlemen. But remember, the present law, the Republic Act 9165, clearly stipulates the penal provision of life imprisonment to death, and we don't want to touch on that. The reason why we stuck to that, even when we approved on third and final reading the version that we are refiling today on House Bill 68, is because we'd like to go straight and expedite and abbreviate the proceedings so that, as we all know, a very contentious issue must be brought to the fore and must be debated so that people would be informed as well as the members. So mas maganda nga ho na pag-usapan yan eh. Kasi ang ina-amend ho natin ay yung mga provision lamang doon sa batas na nagsasabi na sa ating paniwala ay medyo kailangan palakasin, paigtingin, patibayin. We did not talk about the issue of the death penalty. Kagaya nga po ng sinabi ko kanina, we will just allow the Committee on Justice and the learned members of the committee to debate among themselves kung ano ba yung wisdom ng committee pagdating dyan sa usapin ng death penalty. So again, Mr. Chair, I respect the opinions and the position of our two honorable gentlemen, but would like to stick with the bill that we filed, and that I would like to ask the chair to proceed with our deliberations, or perhaps maybe questions. There are questions with respect to the House bill before we invoke Section 48, Mr. Chair.
Let's proceed to Section 15 since we're
Mr. Chairman.
okay now. Kong Ruffy Biazon.
Congressional, yes. Mr. Chairman, we just finished Section 12. May we touch on Section 13?
Yes, what's your concern with Section 13? Kong
Yes,
Ruffy?
Mr. Chairman. Here in the matrix that was provided, there is an amendment to Section 13 of 9165. May we know the rationale of this amendment? Because in the original Section 13 of 9165, it refers to penalties that are provided in Section 11 of 9165. And if we look at Section 11 of 9165, it provides penalty of life imprisonment to death and a fine of 500,000 pesos to 10 million pesos. So it's the same as what is being introduced in Section 11 of HB 68. May we know what the rationale is, why we have to change or why we have to amend the phrasing in Section 11?
You're referring to House Bill 68 of Kong Ace Barbers?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Kong Ace Barbers, please respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, the rationale behind this, Mr. Chair, Honorable Biazon, is that anybody found to have in his possession an amount of drugs that is more than enough, would constitute the presumption of pushing or selling this. Kaya nga po ang sinasabi po natin dito ay if you remember and I think about several years ago there was a concert that happened in somewhere in MOA where party drugs were distributed among the participants, and one of the students that attended that concert died of perhaps overdose. I'm not quite sure about the cause of death, but this is the reason why we wanted to specifically state this in this law para po maiwasan na naman natin yung mga ganitong klaseng mga krimen, Mr. Chair, Honorable Biazon.
Mr. Chairman, kasi I'm referring to amendment of Section 13. Sa original kasi ang nakalagay na penalty is it refers to Section 11 of 9165. Wherein Section 11 says the penalty is life imprisonment to death and a fine of 500,000 pesos. Pero what we're trying to attempt here in HB 68 Section 11 is to remove yung phrase na maximum penalties provided for in Section 11 of this Act and replace it with the phrase penalty of life imprisonment to death and a fine of 500,000 pesos, which is exactly the same din na nahahanap sa Section 11. So why the need of replacing yung phrase na referring to Section 11 kung ang laman ng Section 11 is the same thing naman?
Would that matter, Mr. Chairman? I don't
Mr.
think
Chair,
it's just that
the relevance, Mr. Chairman, is that by introducing it to this bill, it would have the effect of amending RA 9346, which is the introduction of the death penalty. I think that this is the point that we raised earlier. I don't know. This is going to be a later law coming after 9346. So pagka ito naipasok dito at naipasa, it would have the effect of reintroducing the death penalty.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to disagree with Honorable Biazon on this. The reason why we clearly just stipulated this in this section is just to be clear about the penalty or the penal provision of the violation of this section. And I don't think it would matter, Mr. Chair. So I don't know. I beg the indulgence of Congressman Biazon. It's just restating the penalty of the violation of this particular section.
Mr. Chairman, there was no ambiguity in the original provision. It referred to the penalties provided for in Section 11, which was very clear in its language, saying that the penalty of life imprisonment to death and a fine of 500,000 pesos. Ang relevance lang talaga ngayon is that by introducing this, well, I believe that it has the effect of amending 9346, and therefore introducing into this bill the imposition of the death penalty, which now becomes relevant to this representation as an author and to the Honorable Rodriguez, as stated earlier.
Yeah,
I just wanted to clarify, Mr. Chairman, so that I may be guided on how to evaluate and assess this bill before us.
well,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
if you refer to Section 11, Mr. Chair, Your Honor, you would see that there are quantities that are required in your possession that would amount to this kind of a penalty or a penal provision. So we're just re-emphasizing, Mr. Chair. So there, I don't know if it would cause confusion, because as you stated earlier, Your Honor, you said there was no ambiguity. So I don't think there is an issue if we restate the same penalty in the same in another section. Anyway, Section 11 is very clear na meron pong mga qualifications as to anong amount, anong weight, anong penalty, at anong penal provision po dito.
Mr. Chairman.
Well taken, Mr. Chairman. But we have this assessment of what the bill contains. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Kong Rufus?
Yeah, I would like to support Congressman Biazon that if we put again the words death, if we are going to mention them, because the law still says that, the law, the dangerous drug law, has been, repealed as far as the death penalty provisions of that bill, of that law, has been repealed by 9346, June 24, 2006. If we now pass this amendatory bill, that will revive, that will continue to have the words death penalty bill, then it will again repeal as far as 9346 is concerned on an act prohibiting the imposition of death penalty. It would be, as a later law repeals a prior law. We are now saying again, that is my first proposition earlier on, that again, what will happen is that we are saying that we are amending 9346 and we are restoring the death penalty. If we carry in 68 at 2765, if we carry the words life imprisonment to death in those provisions, we seem to be now repealing 9346 and restoring the death penalty, Mr. Chairman. That is why, for us to be very safe on this and clear that we follow 9346, is we have to delete all reference to death penalty in this bill. After all, it is now the standing law. The standing law is 9346 that has prohibited death penalty, and let our Committee on Justice deliberate on whether to really restore that in another bill, another law, restoring that particular death penalty for dangerous drugs offenses if they are so minded. But if we will pass a law now based on our bill 682765 and it says life imprisonment to death, we are repealing 9346, Mr. Chairman. That is the view of this representation.
Kong Hayes, can you please respond, or any representative from the Dangerous Drug Board about your comments or recommendations to the amendment on Section 13 on the proposed Section 11 of House Bill 68. Kong Hayes, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, again. After hearing the explanation of Kong Rufus with respect to that particular penal provision of this section, Section 13, am I correct to say that the proposal of Kong Rufus and Kong Rufi is to retain the old wordings in the 9165
Congress, that was the essence of their suggestion that instead of pushing for Section 11 of your bill, we just retain Section 13 of 9165. Am I correct, Kong Ruffy and Kong Rufus?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that is the essence of my position. In fact, the bill that I filed, which is with the Committee on Justice, was an amendment to 9346 to restore the original penalties prescribed in 9165. That was how I approached it. So if the Committee on Justice comes out with a positive report or favorable report to the bills filed, then the penalties in 9165, original penalties in 9165 would prevail, which is life imprisonment to death, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, in our proposals of Chairman A68 and mine 2765, we have retained the words life imprisonment to death. Now, if we are going to approve these bills, and it will again, excuse me, mention death, we are repealing 9346. That is the effect, because a later law would always repeal an earlier law. So that is the effect if that is. That is why I am saying that if that is the situation, I will be withdrawing 2765 if there are still those words death, because we will be repealing the 9346 and restoring death in this new law, because this will be a later law. But if we remove all references to death, after all, the 9165 had been on the provisions on death had been repealed by 9346, and it has been observed by all the courts. Therefore, I am going to say, if we remove the word death there, I will again be a co-author of 68 and principal author of 2765. And therefore the author of the consolidated bill. But if the death is still there, it has the effect of repealing 9346. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Kong Rufus. May we have a consensus here? Kong Ace Barbers, what is your comment on the suggestions of the two of our two esteemed colleagues?
Well, again, Mr. Chair, from the way I understood it, it does not or it should not be interpreted with ambiguity in these two sections, 11 and 13, or section 13 in relation to section 11. But let me just make it clear that there was no attempt to repeal 9346. If indeed the phrase in this particular section would have the effect of repealing 9346, then I submit to the wisdom of Kong Rufus and Kong Ruffy. But again, not to say that we are approving the repeal. So, Mr. Chair, I submit to the wisdom of Kong Ruffy and Kong Rufus with respect to this particular phrase.
Thank you, Kong H. I think the intent of House Bill 68 and that of Kong Rufus and Kong Ruffy are very clear, not to amend. Yes?
In addition, also, before I forget, Mr. Chair, that only with respect to this particular section, because we might end up changing all other provisions or sections with a penal provision of that. No, we will retain. Mr. Chair, my suggestion is just to retain the wordings of the 916.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Kong Rufus.
I would now therefore move that all the references to death in this bill will be removed so that it will not have the effect of repealing 94.6. So move, Mr. Chairman. so that we will stick to what is the law now. The law now is 9364, and therefore it has repealed 9165 on this, and let us reflect the current state of the law. And so therefore I move that all references to death in the bill, the entire law 9165, which we are going to amend, in this amended version, we are going to move, I move that we remove all references to death penalty. Mr. Chairman.
Second the motion. Second the motion.
Mr. Chair, if I may ask, if I may,
Yes, Kong Ace.
that's exactly the point I was about to raise when we allowed the retention of the original wordings in the 9165 with respect to life imprisonment to death. Mr. Chair, again, as I earlier stated in my opening remarks, that we do not intend or attempt to reimpose the penalty or the death penalty. No? What I'm just saying, Mr. Chair, if I will accede to the suggestion, a brilliant suggestion of Kong Rufus, that all death penalty provision in any of the violations of this law must be removed, then it's as if we're changing the total context of the penal provision of RA 9165. Again, let me ask for a reconsideration to the gentleman from Cagayan de Oro that let's not touch on the issue of death. Let's just retain the original wordings and provisions, penal provisions of the 9165, and let the course of the death penalty reimposition law or proposal be discussed in the Committee on Justice. Anyway, they're going to discuss that soon, and I was advised that on Wednesday we will have the first hearing. So, if I may ask the gentleman from Cagayan de Oro, na kung maaari po sana, wag na po muna nating baguhin yung kung ano po yung nakasulat dun sa original na batas. It's just that I perhaps overlooked itong sa Section 13 because I don't see any ambiguity nor any confusion and I wanted sana nga po na ganun ang penalty. I am open to the position that I am pro-death, no, when it comes to the drug-related offenses. But if we allow the deletion of all the penal provisions in this law that speaks of death penalty, then maybe it will change the whole picture and context of this proposal, Mr. Chair. That's just my position, and I'd like to ask a reconsideration from Kong Rufus.
Yeah,
Kong Rufus.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I really defer to our chairman because indeed it is as if also that the Dangerous Drugs Committee has taken a stand of being against we don't want to have that kind of a position. So I would withdraw, but I would not be an author anymore to 2765 because if this will be approved, the effect, as I have said, will be a repeal of 9346. So I would withdraw my motion because at the same time, we don't also want to put our chairman on the spot that in his committee, we are deleting death, although really, what is the present situation now is that it has been deleted by law, by 9346, but because it is a debate going on, it is something that we should be able to I agree that to the chair that this can be retained, but I cannot be an author anymore to 2765 nor in its consolidation because if the death penalty is still there, then I believe that the effect is that. So I withdraw, Mr. Chairman, in deference to the suggestion of the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Rufus. Let's proceed by stating that
just for a few seconds, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to thank Kong Rufus, no, for reconsidering his position and acceding to my request. Again, I don't want the Committee on Dangerous Drugs. to talk about the reimposition of death penalty. We're just focused on amending the provisions of the Dangerous Drugs Act in order to give it more teeth dun sa implementation ng anti-drug war natin. Nothing of that sort will speak of death penalty here. Yun lang po ang akin. Maraming salamat po, Kong Rufus.